Hello and welcome to our next lesson on this topic of climate change. Last lesson we looked at climate change in the world. Today I would like us to have a look at recycling and why recycling is important. So by the end of today's lesson you should be able to explain why recycling is important. You should be able to explain how some resources are recycled, and you should be able to evaluate the benefits and pitfalls of recycling. So to start us off today, we need to define the word recycling. So recycling. Remember, all keywords are in green. So recycling can be defined as the collecting and processing of materials that have been used so that the materials can be used again. So recycling is the collecting and processing of used materials so that the materials can be used again. So that the materials can be used again. Okay. Now, examples of things that can be recycled include, so we'll just put items that can be recycled include paper, plastic and aluminium. Include paper, plastic and aluminium. Okay. Now, oftentimes aluminium cans are shredded to remove any decoration. The shreds are melted in a furnace that are left to cool in a mould. This is then heated to 600 degrees to soften it, and rollers flatten it out into sheets. So we can just write down as an example, aluminium cans are collected and shredded, collected and shredded to remove labels, etc. We can say then that the shreds are melted in a furnace. The shreds are melted in a furnace and left to cool, and left to cool in a mould. This then sort of forms a big lump of aluminium. So we can then say that this is then heated to 600 degrees Celsius before rollers flatten it into sheets. Okay. Now this is just one example of recycling. This is how we recycle aluminium cans. Obviously, when you're recycling paper or plastics, it might be a little bit different. But for now, this is the one example I'm going to tell you about because it may come up in a question that you get later on. Okay? So, for the remainder of this lesson, I just want us to look at some advantages and disadvantages of recycling. So we can split the screen, or we can draw a table even, that looks like this. And in the left-hand column, we can put advantages of recycling. Advantages of recycling. And in the right-hand column, we can put disadvantages of recycling. Okay? So, the advantages. Resources will last longer. So, resources will last longer. Another advantage includes that we use less energy to make new materials. So we use less energy to make new materials. To make new materials. And finally, it reduces the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. So reduces the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. Okay, now that's important because think of what we said yesterday about climate change. Disadvantages, we can say some people find separating recyclable annoying. So some people don't like to separate their rubbish. And finally, the lorries that collect the recyclables create lots of pollution, such as carbon dioxide. So the lorries that collect the recyclables create lots of carbon dioxide, again, which goes into the atmosphere, contributing to climate change. But it's important that we do recycling because we're eventually going to run out of certain resources. So, for example, phosphorus will run out in 2060 and we need phosphorus for when we're making fertilisers to grow our food so that we can eat. Gold is thought that it will run out by the year 2040. Tin, the year 2030, and aluminium may run out by the year 2500. What I would like you to do now, please, is I would like you to have a go at these questions on the board. I'd like you to pause the video, have a go at them, then make sure you've got a different coloured pen ready to mark your answers and make any corrections where necessary. So pause the video now, press play when you're ready to go over the answers. Okay, so you should have by now had a go at the questions on the board. I hope you've got a different coloured pen to hand so that we can go over the answers. You can mark yours and make corrections wherever you need to, as you would do for any other lesson of mine. And we can paste our first question in. So it says, write down the two statements below that are examples of recycling. The two statements you should have written down was collecting glass bottles, melting the glass and making new bottles. And the other one is that you should have said, where are we? Collecting and melting, this one. Collecting and melting polypropylene bottles and using them to make polythene rope. This one is not recycling because you're just simply reusing. That is different to recycling. So the two for number one you should have written down for 2 marks was that collecting old glass bottles, melting the glass and making new bottles, and collecting and melting polypropylene bottle tops and using them to make polypropylene rope. If we can make this a lot smaller so that it fits and put it down here like so. Question 2 says, describe how aluminium is recycled. We went over that, that's why I gave you that example. So you could say, old aluminium cans are collected and shredded. Your second mark comes from saying that the shreds are melted and cooled in a mould. Your third mark comes from saying that the mould or the moulded aluminium is heated to 600 degrees Celsius and then rollers flatten the aluminium into sheets. Okay. Question 3. Give 3 reasons to explain why it's important to recycle aluminium. So your 3 reasons should have been that aluminium resources will last longer. Your second mark comes from saying that recycling requires less energy. So recycling requires less energy than making new. And finally, your third mark comes from saying that recycling produces less CO2. So recycling produces less carbon dioxide. Our final question, number 4, suggest changes you could make to limit your consumption of natural resources. So you could buy fewer things. That's a nice, easy start. You could take used things to charity shops. So you're not recycling them, you're just taking them to be used again. And you could recycle paper, glass, metals. So, I hope that has been some use to you. You should now be able to explain why recycling is important, explain how some resources are recycled, and be able to tell me some advantages and disadvantages of recycling. If you have any questions, please drop a comment in the Google Classrooms or send me an email directly and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Until the next video, please take care and I will see you then.